Hey everyone, and welcome to your C# tutorial. As you see, I have Visual Studio pulled up here with the boilerplate code ready to go. This tutorial is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be mostly coding an example of how you can use objects. So far we've tackled objects piece by piece using one function here, one function there. This example is sort of meant to bring everything together. And so we're going to be creating a combat simulator. So if you've ever played, any type of video game before, whereas there was some type of battle involved, this is essentially how it's done. I'm sure in most games it's going to be a little bit more complicated than this, but in general, what we're doing here, or what we will be doing, is essentially how you would sort of create a combat in a game, as far as totaling the amount of damage and things like that go. So let's just get into it. We're going to start by creating a new class, and we're going to call it character. And each character will have a private string first name, and they will have a private integer for, we'll call this strength, and we'll create another private integer called health. So now let's do some getters and setters around these. So we'll do a string return type, and we'll create a method called get first name. Actually, you know what? Let's just explicitly make this public, and we will return we'll call it this dot first name. Of course, this, as we discussed before, refers to the instance of the object once we create one. So we'll return first name there for this. We will never need to set the first name, because we'll create a constructor that sets all these variables. So let's create our second method, and it'll be a public. It'll return an int, and we'll call this one get strength. And we will return this dot strength. Same thing as the first name. This will be used to get our strength variable. And let's create another function, public integer, and we'll call this one get health. And just like everything else, we will return this dot health. And then for the health, we're also going to want to create a setter for when the character takes damage. So let's create another function, and it will return a void, and it will be called set health. Actually, you know what? Let's call it, set health is fine. But in our setter here, let's make this a little bit different. It will take an integer, and we will call that integer damage. And in our set health function, we will say this dot health is minus equal to damage. And so what this operator does, we talked about this earlier in the class, this basically is saying set the health member variable equal to health minus damage. So if we pass in 5 as our damage, and our health member variable is 10, then let's say we pass in 2 as our damage, and our health member variable is 10, then after we calculate this, our health member variable will be 8. It'll be 10 minus 2. So that's how our setter will work for our character, for our health member variable in our character class. Okay, and our last method that we're going to want to create, scroll down here, we'll say public, and this will return a Boolean. We need a method to tell if the character has lost the battle or not. So we will call this method has fallen. Oops. Meaning, has the character fallen? Has the character lost the battle? So in this, we'll say if this dot health is less than 0. We'll say if they're at 0, they're still active and they haven't lost yet. If health is less than 0, then we will return true. And then we'll say else we will return false. So if their health is, picking that up, if their health is less than 0, we'll say that they have fallen and they've lost the battle. So we will return true. Otherwise, if it's above 0 or 0 or above, then we'll say that it is false. They have not fallen. Okay, so good. This is our basic character class, except for we need to add our constructor, which I almost forgot about. So we have all of our member variables here, and we have all of our methods that we need. Let's create our constructor now. We will say it is a public constructor. So as we know, to create a constructor, we just use the character, the class name, which is character. And so for our constructor, what I would like it to do is I'd like us to take in all of the variables, all of our initial value for our variables. So we'll take in first name, strength, and health. So we will say, take in a string for first name. We'll just call it, we'll do an underscore first name just so we can tell it apart from our first name member variable. This is just something that I like to do. It's not a hard and fast naming convention. We'll take an int and we will call this strength. We'll take another int and we will call this health. And so in our constructor, we'll set our member variables to their initial values. So we take in the parameter of first name here, and we'll set our member variable first name to equal our parameter first name there. We'll do the same thing for strength. Oops. Strength. Sorry. This dot strength. We'll set it to strength. And we'll do the same thing for health. Cool. So we have our constructor ready, and now our class, our character class, is completely finished. Perfect. Okay, so let's now create our two characters. We'll start by creating a variable of character type, and we will call that, we'll name that variable hero, and we'll set it equal to a new character class. And we're going to invoke our constructor here. We will call our character Spider-Man, and we will give him a strength of, 75, and we will give him a health of 300. Cool. So let's create another character, and we'll call this character villain, and we will set this character equal to a new character object. We will call this character Dr. Octopus, which is one of Spider-Man's nemesises. We'll give him a strength of, we'll say 80, and we'll give him a health of 200. So pretty evenly matched, sort of evenly matched battle here. So we have our hero and we have our villain, but we have no way of doing any type of battle. So let's create that functionality now. All right, so let's scroll to the bottom here. Actually, above our character class, let's create another class, and we will call this battle. And in our battle class, let's create a static function, a public static function. So we'll say public static function, and this will return nothing. So we'll make a void function. Well, let's call this do battle. Okay, and so do battle will take in a character. We'll call them attacker. and we'll take in another character, and we'll call them defender. Cool. So now what we need to do is we have to figure out a way to make this somehow random. So as we can see up here, we have Spider-Man, who has a strength of 75, and Dr. Octopus, who has a strength of 80. If we simply took 75 away from 200 as an attack, we have to create some type of attacking system. So if we use Spider-Man's strength of 75 and just subtracted it from 200, Spider-Man would win every time. So we need to make it kind of random, and C# gives you kind of a nice way to do that. It has a random number generator. So let's create a random number generator now. So the random number generator is actually a class just like the class that we've created down here. They've done it the same way. So what we can do is we can say random as the type, because the class is called random, and we will call this damage generator, and we'll set it equal to a new random object. So what this random class can do is it can generate random numbers. So let's take our damage generator object and call a method from our random class. So we will say damage generator dot next. And so what the dot next does is it generates a random number. And it is an overloaded method. If you remember previously in our previous tutorials, an overloaded method is a method that has the same name, but can take different parameters. So, for example, we can pass in a 0 and a 10, and that will give us a random number between 0 and 10. So for our damage generator, it would be a good idea to generate damage that goes from 0 to our character's strength attribute, or our strength member variable. So let's pass in attacker.getStrength. And now we will generate a random number from 0 to our attacker's strength. And we can store that in a variable. So let's create a variable called damage and set it equal to our random number between 0 and the attacker's strength. Okay, so we have our damage variable here. Now we need to set our defender's health equal to his previous health minus the damage. And so we can use the setter that we created for that. So if we go down here, we see, remember, our setter for set health takes in a damage integer, and it will subtract that damage from our health variable, member variable. So let's call defender.setHealth, and we will pass in our damage variable from up here. So what this will do is, so what this method does so far is we pass in an attacker and a defender. And the reason that we call them attacker and defender is because sometime the hero will be the attacker, and sometime the villain will be the attacker. And sometime the hero will be the defender, and sometime the villain will be the defender. So the two characters get passed in. We create a random number generator that we call damage generator. And we using the damage generator object, we generate a number that is from 0 and can go up to the attacker's strength. So if Spider-Man is the attacker, the random number will be from 0 to 75. If Dr. Octopus is the attacker, the random number will be from 0 to 80. And then we set our defender's health to that. Or we subtract it from our defender's health with our setter method. There's one last thing we need in our do battle method, and that is some indicator to the outside world about what just happened. Because as a user of this program, we're not going to know what is happening behind the scenes. So let's do a console.writeLine, and we will say that attacker.getName, get first name, has just done, and then we will, or actually let's say has hit, and then we will say defender.getFirstName. I'm going to jump down to a new line here. That doesn't affect the console print at all. It just kind of makes it a little bit more readable. So we'll say our attacker first name has hit defender first name, and we will say for, and I'll create a new line here. Oops. For, and then we will say damage and say hit points. Awesome. So what this will say is when we generate our damage variable and we subtract that from our defender's health, we can then have a write line that says the attacker has hit the defender for damage amount of hit points. Awesome. So this is our do battle method. This looks good. Now what we need also is a way to tell if somebody has lost the battle, because we need to know when to stop the battle. So we'll create a public static method, and this will return a Boolean, and it will, we'll call it someone has fallen. And so we'll pass in our characters. We'll pass in, and we'll pass in a, we'll just say, we'll call them hero and villain here. And we'll say if hero dot has fallen, or, and remember that this is the logical or operator, or villain has fallen, then we will return true. So if one of either the hero or the villain has fallen, then we will return true, and someone has fallen, someone is lost. And we will say else, return false. So return false meaning that no one has fallen. Okay, awesome. So this is our battle class. We're ready to write the sort of like the program part of this that can actually show the user that battle is happening. Okay, so let's go back to our main function here, and let's make the rest of the program. So let's do a console.writeLine, and this is going to kind of introduce the program. We will say, welcome to the battle. I don't know, I'm not super creative here. We'll do a console.writeLine, and we'll say hero.get first name verse, oops, I forgot the plus sign here. You gotta use the plus sign. So it'll say hero first name, which is Spider-Man, verse villain, get first name versus Dr. Octopus. Cool. And actually, just to make this extra intense, let's do some of these. We'll do this. Welcome to the battle. Just to get everybody real riled up. Okay, so now what we need to do, we have our do battle function, but we need it to loop until somebody has fallen. So to do that, let's create a while loop. So we will say while, and let's use our battle class dot, and we will say someone has fallen, and we'll pass in our hero and our villain. So what this says is while someone has fallen, we're going to do what's inside this loop. But we actually want it to, we want this loop to happen as long as someone has not fallen. So in order to do that, we can use our exclamation point, because you remember the exclamation point or the bang operator reverses the Boolean. So someone has fallen returns a Boolean if either the hero or the villain has fallen. So it'll return true when someone has fallen. But we want this loop to happen while this condition is false. So we use the bang operator or the exclamation point to reverse that. And so now while someone has not fallen, we will call our battle class and our static function, and we will say do battle, and we will pass in the hero, and we'll pass in the villain. And so what this will do is we have in our do battle function, we have an attacker and a defender. So what we need to do is we'll run it with the hero passed in as the attacker once. And then in our next line, let's call the static function again, and let's pass in the villain this time. And that way it's even. So the hero gets one shot, and then the villain gets one shot, and the hero gets one shot, and the villain gets one shot. And it'll just keep looping that way until one of them has fallen. Okay, cool. So this will keep running as long as the hero and the villain are still alive. Now we need to figure out what happens once one of them falls. Okay, so once a character has fallen, we'll exit this while loop. So we'll exit the while loop, and we're going to need to, one, figure out that which character has fallen, and then two, we're going to have to print out to the user, hey, this character's fallen, the battle's over. So we can start with an if statement, and we can say if hero dot has fallen. So if the hero has fallen, we can do a console dot write line, and we can say, oh no, a space there, and we will do hero dot get first name, and then we'll say it has fallen. So it'd be like, oh no, Spider-Man has fallen. And then we can have an else block where we say, so if the hero hasn't fallen, then we only have two characters for combat, and that's the villain. So if the hero has not fallen, then we can say, create a string and say, hooray. And we'll do villain dot get first name, and we can say has fallen. So it'd be like, in this case, Dr. Octopus has fallen. Okay, awesome. So this should be about it. So let's create some space for the terminal to pop up, and let's run this program and see what happens. Okay, so let's make this a little bit bigger. And okay, so for some reason it started down here. That's probably just an issue with my previous use of the terminal. So we have welcome to the battle. Perfect. Spider-Man versus Dr. Octopus. Spider-Man has hit Dr. Octopus for 61 points. Dr. Octopus hit Spider-Man. Spider-Man hit Dr. Octopus. And you can see how the random number goes from 0 to the strength of the character. It kind of randomizes the number of hits that happen. And so at the end, we see, oh no, Spider-Man has fallen. And so we'll stop it there. And so we have the first hit is 61, the second is 36, the next one is 29, and so forth. Let's run it again, and we can see that how the random number generator truly does create random numbers. We can see that, we're starting out with 25 now, and then 11 and 12. So you can see how the random number generator, and this time actually we can see that Dr. Octopus has actually fallen. So that's great. Cool. So something kind of interesting here is I get a lot of questions about why to use member variables and why not just have those variables public. One of the nice things about using member variables, like for example, use our first name member variable, for example. When we run our program, we can see that, Dr. Octopus and Spider-Man is being printed out a million times here, just a bunch of times. And in our program, we see that we're using, first name all over the place. Now, if we didn't have a member variable and we just wrote in Spider-Man, we would have Spider-Man written all over the place here. We'd have it written here, 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 just all over the place. 12 times, actually. So let's do this again, and let's change it from Spider-Man to Superman. And we'll keep Dr. Octopus just for, whatever reason. So let's run that. And so now we see Superman versus Dr. Octopus. Superman has hit Dr. Octopus, blah, 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 Superman, Superman, Superman. So you can see that that's kind of the beauty of member variables. If we want to change the program, we just change one variable one place, and it changes it throughout the entirety of the program here. That's why we use member variables and variables. It's because it's easier to change things. So we can have the same essential program, but it looks totally different to the user. You envision different characters and things like that by just changing one variable. So that's the benefit of having member variables in a program like this. Anyway, so it's kind of a little bit of a longer video. My last few videos have been a little bit longer. It's just a little bit easier to make these in long form versus dividing the topics out topic by topic, which is really beneficial sometimes, but in other times it's good to have things grouped together. For this example, I thought it would be good to have all of this code grouped together as one kind of cohesive example of a lot of the things we've learned over the course of this class so far. In this little program that we've created, you'll see Boolean logic, you'll see if statements, variables, functions, getters, setters, constructors, classes, objects. It's all happening here, right? So this is our first kind of example where everything is kind of coming together in one cohesive program. And you can see the results of that, right? Like this is really how, if you were to create a very simple text-based game, this is how you would do it. And even in more complex graphics-based games, the logic for that is very similar to what we're using in this program. So this is going to be probably one of the last tutorials in our class, and it's one of the most comprehensive as well. I might make maybe one more wrap-up video to talk about some topics, but this is likely the last video. Thank you guys for watching through this whole course, and I hope you learned something. Thanks.